Hey, it's Awkwardish, space where we slow down, get honest, and unlearn though we don't talk about that rules we grew up with. I'm Ruby, meeting you here in the messy middle. The healing, the spiraling, the breakthroughs, the how is this my life moments. So grab a snack, get hydrated, and let's get awkward. All right, awkwardlings. Today we're talking about something a lot of us don't realize until we're well into adulthood. Sometimes embarrassingly deep into adulthood, which is that the things we call quirks or flaws or why am I like this behaviors were actually coping skills, survival strategies, stuff we built as kids because we had to. Nobody tells you that. Nobody pulls you aside at 12 and says, hey, the reason you're acting like a tiny, exhausted parent is because you're adapting to chaos. No, you just grow up thinking you're dramatic or too sensitive or too independent or too responsible or too irresponsible. You know, whatever. So, today we're talking about the childhood coping skills you didn't know were coping skills and how they're still showing up in your adult life. So, my intention with this episode is simple to help you understand that the way you learn to survive wasn't random. It wasn't a personality flaw. It wasn't you being difficult or too much or not enough. It was strategy. And even if those strategies don't serve you anymore, they made sense at the time. They protected you. They kept you afloat. And you deserve to understand them with compassion instead of shame. Alright, so let me tell you the moment I realized my childhood's coping skills were coping skills. It didn't happen when I compared my childhood to someone else's. It happened when I compared my relationships with men to what other women seemed to experience. Because I grew up with a violent stepdad, my mom's second husband, not her current husband, who was a wonderful father. I thought conflict between couples was supposed to be loud, explosive, and unpredictable. I thought that was just how men were. Just odd because, like, my dad was around. He wasn't around a lot, but he was around, and he definitely was not like my former stepdad. It's interesting how kids kind of, you know, write their own narratives, or children have very black and white thinking. uh, but yeah, like I said, I thought that was just how men were, how relationships worked, how love sounded. To be clear, my mom was a good mom. She still is. She was steady. She was normal. She was the safe part of my childhood. But the male presence in the house, that was where the danger lived. That was where the rules changed. That was where I learned to read the air like my life depended on it. Unsuccessfully, I might add, due to the neurodivergence. So when I got older and started dating, I didn't know what to do with men who weren't like that. Men who didn't yell, who didn't slam things, who didn't make threats or walk around like a storm cloud waiting to break. I remember being with someone who spoke calmly during disagreements. And my whole body was like, what is this? Why aren't you escalating? Why aren't you getting scary? Why aren't you proving you're upset in the way I was trained to expect? I was suspicious. I thought it was a ruse, like trying to get my guard down so things could really get bad. Um, Later on, it hit me. Oh, I wasn't bad at relationships. I was conditioned for danger. I had built an entire emotional operating system around anticipating violence. And when it wasn't there, I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to trust it. And I certainly didn't know how to relax into it. With therapy, I realized my childhood coping skills didn't just stay in childhood. They followed me into adulthood, into dating, conflict, intimacy, and they were still running the show. So let's go on to the big five childhood coping skills. First one is hyper independence. You may have learned early that needing things wasn't safe. Maybe adults were unreliable, unpredictable, or overwhelmed. Maybe asking for help led to punishment or disappointment. So you became the kid who handled everything alone. The adult version of this is I got it. Even when you very much don't got it. Um, hyper independence is Hyper independence is just self protection wearing a productivity badge. The next one is people pleasing. As a kid, you may have learned that keeping adults happy kept you safe. So you monitored moods, you softened your voice, you apologized for things that weren't your fault. You became the emotional thermostat of the house. The adult version is you say yes when your whole body's screaming no. You over explain, shrink, disappear yourself to keep the peace. And as a recovering people pleaser, uh, I felt so attacked when I was doing my research and this one came up because, yeah, sometimes it does feel easier to just give people what they want instead of, standing firm. But that leads to resentment and being taken advantage of. So it's important to remember that people pleasing is not a personality trait. It's a survival strategy for many of us. Third is emotional numbing. Some kids learn early that feelings are dangerous. Maybe expressing them led to ridicule, punishment, or being ignored. So you shut them down. You learn to stay neutral, quiet, and invisible. Something else that came up when I was doing my research for this, something I hadn't thought about in decades. So my mom's second husband, he used to do this thing where he would like mock us kids if we expressed any negative emotion. He would fake cry at us and like make it like over exaggerating, throwing mock tantrums, like ways that a grown man shouldn't behave, especially toward children. And it definitely led to us not feeling safe to express emotions around him. And he was always around. So we shoved a lot of things down. Um, the adult version of this looks like you may not know, how you feel until it's too late. Or you default to, I'm fine, and disconnect when things get too real. So before you beat yourself up, it's important to remember that numbing is not coldness, it's literally just you protecting yourself. Number four is hypervigilance. If your home was unpredictable, your nervous system became a full-time security guard. You learned to scan for danger, tone shifts, facial expressions, anything that could signal a storm. The adult version may look like always being on alert, not being able to relax around new people, or assuming something bad is about to happen, also known as anxiety. One of my oldest friends. That was very much sarcasm. Um, but yeah, hypervigilance is your body saying, I've seen this movie before, and I don't want to see it again. Lastly, we have parentification. You may have become the helper, the fixer, the emotional support human. Maybe you raised siblings or soothed adults. Maybe you handled responsibilities way beyond your age. The adult version is you may overfunction and burn out, and then that leads to resenting people, but you still show up for them. You may not know how to let others care for you. Parentification teaches you to be the adult before you ever got to be a child. So, here's a reframe I want you to take with you. You weren't dramatic. You were overwhelmed. You weren't cold. You were protecting yourself. You weren't mature. You were surviving. You weren't clingy. You were scared. You weren't bossy. You were managing chaos. You weren't too independent. You were alone. These weren't flaws. They were adaptations. Adaptations that kept you safe, as safe as you could keep yourself, and helped you survive. And the fact that you made it out with any softness left at all is a miracle. If this episode stirred anything up, and honestly, how could it not? I have a short guided reset over on Awkwardly Mindful that pairs really well with this topic. It's gentle, simple, and it's designed to help you settle after talking about heavy childhood stuff. So, if you want something to help you land after this, head over there. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with a question. Well, actually, two questions. Something to think about on your own time. Which coping skill shows up the most in your adult life? And what did it protect you from? Not what's wrong with you or what you need to fix, just what did it protect you from? Because once you understand the purpose, you can start choosing something new. If you want to stay connected, you can come find me online. I'm on Instagram and Threads as Awkward Rube and Awkwardish Podcast. On TikTok as Awkward Rube and on YouTube as Awkward Rube and Awkwardish Pods. So thank you for being here with me today. These conversations aren't easy, but they matter. And you deserve to understand yourself with compassion and not criticism. Your childhood self did the best they could with what they had. Your adult self gets to choose differently now. I'll see you next week.